and welcome to a quick discussion of NieR Automata. With the upcoming re-release of the first NieR, I've been replaying Automata, so I wanted to give my overall thoughts on it and talk a little bit about the series as a whole. NieR Automata was released in 2017, and was kind of a surprise hit. It released at a really crowded time of the year, with games like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Horizon Zero Dawn releasing around the same time, and yet, NieR Automata managed to stand out. Reviews were extremely positive, critic scores average around a 90 out of 100, and as of 2021, Automata has sold around 5.5 million copies worldwide. It's honestly a really fun game. The story and characters and setting are all really great. The gameplay is really fun. It was actually co-developed by Platinum Games, so it kind of plays like a character action game, similar to something like Bayonetta or Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. It's not as complicated as either of those, but it's definitely serviceable and enjoyable enough. There are also elements of other genres as well, like on-rails vehicle sections. So yeah, it's a very interesting game, like how it combines different genres, like RPG elements with action elements. And overall, it's probably one of my favorite games from 2017, and that is saying a lot, given that 2017 is one of my favorite years for video games ever. So many games released in 2017 that were absolutely amazing, and Automata definitely is one of them. It's not perfect though, there are definitely problems. Specifically, the pacing of the story is kind of not great at times. Without going into spoilers, there's a part near the middle of the game where basically you re-experience events in the story from a different perspective, and that part kind of feels a little bit slower because you're not actually experiencing new story for the most part. But once you get past that, then the story picks up again. The other major issue is the game's performance. I am playing this on a base PS4, and it runs well enough, but it definitely doesn't feel as polished as it should. So you might notice things like pop-in or slowdown, and it's actually worse on PC. The PC version was notoriously glitchy, and to my knowledge, it was never fixed. There are fan mods that actually fix a lot of the problems, but officially, I don't think they ever patched the game. Which is kind of a shame, because I wish more people could experience this game in a better format. The game was later ported in 2018 to the Xbox, so it's also playable on Series X now, and I imagine playing it on the Series X would actually be pretty good, because I feel like that would smooth over a lot of the performance issues. Even playing on the PS5 would probably help, or a PS4 Pro in my case. So yeah, overall, Automata is great. Did I mention the soundtrack? The soundtrack is honestly incredible, and again, that says a lot, because 2017 was a great year for video game music as well. But this is still one of my favorite video game soundtracks from 2017. So yeah, overall, Automata is really great. So what makes it so surprising that it was a success? The NieR series, which is only 2 games technically, but 5 games in a way, was kind of a cult classic at this point. So basically, the first NieR was released in 2010, and didn't do particularly well. The critic average for it is around a 68 out of 100, and the game sold around 100,000 copies worldwide. That's like a tenth of what Automata sold, basically, if I'm doing the math correctly. So yeah, the first NieR was not particularly successful, but it's considered a cult classic because of its story and characters and setting. A lot of people say that the first NieR actually has a better story than Automata, even though the gameplay is actually worse. The gameplay is a lot slower paced from what I've played, and I feel like the world itself is less interesting, even though the characters in the world are actually really good. So for example, the original NieR was criticized for having very bland environments and kind of dated graphics even for like 2010. And the gameplay wasn't exactly popular because of how slow-paced it was. But yeah, it apparently is very much worth playing through it for the story and the characters, at least. And it's actually very complicated in terms of how the game was actually released in general, because of there being two versions of NieR. So, the first NieR was released as two versions in Japan and one version elsewhere. So, in Japan, there was NieR Gestalt, which was the 360 version, and there's NieR Replicant, which is the PS3 version. NieR Gestalt features an older version of the protagonist, who is trying to save his daughter from a mysterious illness. In Replicant, the protagonist is younger, and as a result, the character he's trying to save is instead his sister. So, Replicant is considered the canon version of the game, but in the West, Gestalt was actually released on both 360 and PS3. So this re-release is actually the first time Replicant will be released internationally, as this is the version being adapted for the new release. But the series' history is actually even more complicated than that, because NieR is a spin-off of another series called Drakengard. So Drakengard is a PS2 JRPG that got two sequels, I think one on PS2 and one on PS3, and to put it mildly, while NieR has its fans, even though it has some issues, I really haven't seen anyone talk positively about Drakengard. From what I gather, those games are not very popular or good. But basically, the first Drakengard has multiple endings, one of which leads to Drakengard 2, and one of which leads to NieR. So yeah, it's a very complicated series, technically, a very complicated timeline. So yeah, it's very cool that the first game is finally being re-released, and they're actually tweaking quite a bit of it. It's not a straightforward remaster, it's actually kind of like an overhaul of some of the gameplay mechanics, and I really hope this helps to make NieR a better game that more people can actually experience and enjoy. That's being released in a week from when this video is being uploaded, and I'm actually really excited about it. I'm probably not going to play it right away, because I'm not really in the mood for a really heavy game, and I hear NieR is very intense, even more intense than Automata. I tend to say it both ways, to be honest. Sometimes I say Automata, sometimes I say Automata. I'm not sure if there's actually a canon pronunciation, by the way. But yeah, it is cool, and if you have like a 360 as an example, sadly, NieR is not forward compatible, and thus the only way to play Gestalt now will be the original 360 version, or PS3 version in the West. Because of the difference in protagonists, there's actually kind of some merit to actually playing the new version, even if you've already played Gestalt, to see what's different. One thing that's actually really impressive about the new version is they actually got back most of the voice cast, which for the English cast is honestly really impressive because a lot of the people in that cast went on to be very popular shortly after. So, two of the main supporting actors in NieR are Liam O'Brien and Laura Bailey, who at the time were doing a lot of like JRPG and anime type roles, I feel, but afterwards they kind of started doing a show called Critical Role that's like kind of popular, so I'm actually kind of surprised they managed to get back so much of the original cast. Obviously, NieR, or the protagonist, had to be recast due to this version having the younger version. But other than that, I think most of the cast has been confirmed to be coming back, which is great, because the voice cast was a big part of why these characters were so good, apparently. And I'm actually really excited about this. But yeah, overall, I am still enjoying replaying this game a lot. I'm probably not going to finish it by the time Replicant releases. By the way, the full name of the re-release is ridiculous. It's called NieR Replicant version 1.224744871139. And that's not even the worst name out of this franchise. The DLC for Automata has a ridiculously weird name, and I'm not even sure if I can say it properly, even reading it, and trying to play the game at the same time. But yeah, the series definitely has some quirky elements to it like that, and another quirky thing that I like about Automata is there are a lot of joke endings. By doing various specific tasks throughout the game, you'll be able to get various special endings. There are 26 endings in total, with 5 main endings, and the rest being mostly joke endings. And a lot of them are very clever. So yeah, there's something about this series that's very engaging, even though on a technical level, they're definitely not perfect. I remember at the time, this game was kind of criticized because Square Enix also was releasing Final Fantasy XV around the same time. This sort of became a style versus substance debate because this game obviously was the more popular of the two, even though it looks a lot less polished. 15 has a lot better presentation, but from what I've heard, has worse gameplay and writing. So it kind of goes to show that production values aren't everything in games. Even though this game definitely has some rough edges, it definitely is still a very good game because of its solid writing and core gameplay. So yeah, overall, I really like this game. It's been a lot of fun revisiting it. And now, it's actually pretty easy to play. It's actually on Game Pass now, so if you have an Xbox and Game Pass, you can play it. It's also on Game Pass PC, but probably would not recommend that because the PC version is inherently not great. And apparently the Game Pass version still has some problems. So yeah, overall, I would still recommend this game. It is very dark, by the way. I don't know if I really mentioned that. It is M for mature, and it definitely earns that rating. And I hear the first game is even worse, so I'm curious to see how that goes whenever I get around to that. So yeah, in general, I also really like the open world elements of this. I like open world games a lot. I like the sense of exploration. All those little red icons on the mini-map are all side quests, and I really like having a lot of options for things to do in these games. And yeah, the original is a little bit more segmented, like it is like an interconnected world, but they're basically loading screens instead of like a seamless transition from one area to the next. So I think the open world element does help to interest me a little bit more as well. Obviously, more areas open up over time, and some areas change considerably, and even the music changes. So there's kind of a dynamic soundtrack where some of the songs will actually change a bit as you keep playing, which I honestly think is a really great detail. Even though there are some things I don't care about in this game, in general, I still think it's a solid game, even though it even has less polish than some of the other big titles in 2017. There's just something that's inherently interesting and engaging about this world and these characters that help to carry some of the carry the game past some of its weaker elements. And yeah, it still is a shame that the PC version isn't very good. If I were a PC gamer, I probably would not play the new game until I heard a lot of reviews, just in case. Also, by the way, Replicant version whatever is... Well, for one thing, it's actually supposed to be the square root of 1.5. Hence the weird number for the subtitle, but also it's actually only on PS4 and Xbox One. So while it's forward compatible, it's not natively designed for PS5 and Series X, which is kind of a shame. At some point, I would like to see a native PS5 or Series X version of Automata as well, just to see if that would be able to smooth out some of the problems. So yeah, being able to seamlessly go from one area to the next is honestly really cool. And this is actually one of my favorite areas, partly because of the soundtrack and just the atmosphere being very unique. There's something very unique about NieR that a lot of other... that I haven't really seen out of many other games, like, recently. So yeah, in general, I still highly recommend this game. With the caveat that it is very dark at times. But yeah, it's very enjoyable for the most part, and I am looking forward to eventually playing the re-release. It's not just a re-release, by the way, or like a remaster, it's like an upgraded re-release, where they've actually retooled some of the gameplay elements, hopefully to try to address some of the complaints about the original version of NieR. So, at the time of this upload, it's releasing in like a week. I hope it's good. I hope they actually do fix a lot of the problems, and it is really successful, because I've heard nothing but good things about NieR, at least the story, not really so much everything else, but at least the story and characters are worth experiencing, at the very least, even if the game is not ideal, but hopefully this new version fixes that problem, and it actually does become a genuinely great game, in addition to having a very good story. So yeah, that's kind of my overall thoughts on Automata and the first NieR, and even briefly going over Drakengard, which, yeah, I've heard is not ideal, but luckily I don't think it's tied too closely to NieR, so it's fairly skippable, thankfully, in terms of, like, you don't really have to play Drakengard, and it's also not possible to play because it was only on PS2, and then the PS3 one doesn't really have a strong connection to NieR, from what I've gathered. So yeah, in general, I think that is about all I had to say about NieR Automata. So thank you for watching, and I hope you'll join me next time for another discussion.